Hello, my name is Tammy Mah-Fraser, Executive Director of Health Platforms Alberta Innovates, and today I'm interviewing Dr. Michael Hill, Professor for the Departments of Clinical Neurosciences, Community Health Sciences, Medicine and Radiology at the University of Calgary, and Director of the Stroke Unit for the Calgary Stroke Program. He is also an Executive Committee member of the Alberta Clinical Research Consortium, a provincial initiative with a vision of high-quality, integrated, and efficient clinical research in Alberta. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks, Tammy.
So, Michael, you've been involved in clinical research for many years. Can you tell us why it's important to conduct and include clinical trials as part of your practice?
Well, I think it relates a lot to trying to improve care for patients. There's a nice virtuous cycle that evolves when you're taking care of patients and you identify, well, maybe we could do this better, which is essentially a research question. And then you try to solve that question with a research protocol in some way, and then as those results become known, you can then reintegrate it back into your practice, and then new questions arise. And that process of sorting out answers to questions that arise in clinical care, or new treatments that could be sorted out, can be done locally, but more commonly when we collaborate either nationally or internationally, that's where we can solve some of the larger questions in my field, which is stroke neurology, and introduce new treatments. Many of these things that we've done have just simply required collaboration amongst 10, 20, 50, 100 sites around the world to get answers, and then we try to bring it back to the patient. So it actually starts from the bedside, goes back to the bench, comes back to the bedside, and that cycle of research is why it's important for my practice.
So coronavirus is on the minds of many individuals today, and we hear about several promising treatments. So why is it important to do trials, and can you tell us about your most recent trial?
Yeah, I think it's generally important to do trials because it's the highest quality data that we can bring to bear to solve a problem. And I would say two observations about what's been happening in society and globally in general, and that is that, like all situations when we encounter something entirely new, there's an immense amount of uncertainty that leads to anxiety, and then people abandoning sometimes some of their good scientific principles and reaching for solutions which had never had any hope of being real, right? People look for magic bullets, and there's lots of that going on. Unfortunately, many of our leaders around the world have stated publicly the most outrageous things, and it has actually harmed people because people have taken it at face value. So if we're going to solve this problem, and we'll solve it, we have to adhere to our good scientific principles, good clinical science, and do trials to test things that may or may not work in treating COVID-19. So I got pulled into a trial looking at hydroxychloroquine, which has been a drug that's available for a long time. So it would be repurposing it for use in this condition. And it turns out it does have antiviral activity in the lab. It's been shown to do that. And so in order to understand whether this drug is useful, it could help treat the condition, and whether it's safe to treat it. So there's always a balance of risk and benefit. And I'd remind everyone that all drugs and interventions have some possibility for side effects. In this case, I think they're really, really small with hydroxychloroquine, which is another favorable reason to test it.
Great. It sounds like participants and the patients are critical in a trial. How are the relationships with clinical trial participants and their families so important for the success of a trial?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Tammy. And I think, certainly one of the things that we've been doing in Canada, around the world, and research is in the last 10 years really is recognizing how important and getting patients more directly involved in clinical research. So sure, clinical research activities are generally volunteer activities. A patient has a particular condition or a disease of some kind, and they participate in a trial for two reasons. One is they may benefit from the treatment that's being offered, which is not routinely available. Even though they might get randomized to placebo, they may still benefit by better care. And then if there's an altruistic motive, they are helping move the science forward. And for the next person who comes along with their particular condition, then maybe we've learned something more and we'll be able to offer them treatments.
Thank you, Michael, for joining us today and for conducting clinical trials. International Clinical Trials Day is about pausing and saying thanks to the researchers, clinicians, research coordinators, and nurses, and of course, the participants and their families who all help to improve the health of Albertans. Thank you for joining us today.